Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing fighting water with water. Well, the reason for the video is I was reading a recent article from the Tiger, that's Thaiger, thetiger.com, and tip of the hat to those folks over there. I'm only going to quote a very small excerpt of this to just kind of give my take on it, and then sort of go from there. I urge those who are watching this video, go read that article in detail. A lot of information in there, and they kind of have their own perspective on all of this. But article is titled, Police Use Water Cannons to Stop Illegal Water Fight / Protest at Democracy Monument. Quoting directly, and again, I'm just quoting a small piece of this. You can go check this out for yourself. We knew this would happen. Police using water cannons to quote-unquote dampen protesters defying the water splashing ban. How ironic. Yeah, that was exactly what I was thinking. As they go into in that article in quite a bit more detail than I'm going to go into here, there is kind of a political undercurrent to this. So that's really not the bailiwick of this channel, and I'm not going to get into all of that on this in this video. The reason is just to kind of chuckle about the irony and also just where we're at with this. Some two years in, we're dealing with all of this, and since the inception of the emergency decree in March of 2020, again, you know, my position on this is we didn't know what this was in March, April, May, even June of 2020. But after the first lockdown, I can't see any reason why we continued with a lot of these policies. When we didn't know what this was, again, I don't think there was a lot of data at the time, and I think we're starting to see this now, and it's coming into clear focus. But you know, there was arguably not very much data to support the policy decisions made globally. And I'm not picking on Thailand here. The US made a lot of these decisions, other countries did as well. And quite frankly, they were all not particularly good decisions when they were made. We've seen the economies in our countries be absolutely laid low. A great deal of suffering has befallen people in an economic sense as a direct result of this. And notwithstanding, you know, sort of media obfuscation or obfuscation on the part of various officials out there in various countries, at the end of the day, the problems in the economy and the so-called supply chains and everything, it all stems from the lockdowns. I mean, that's really, if you want, maybe not all, there's arguments to be made that there were some ancillary effects from other things, but when you I mean, I thought this was interesting. I was listening to a historian on a podcast a couple of days ago, and he brought up the fact, even during World War II, they didn't shut down everybody's economy. If anything, the economies were running. You know, it was really quite unprecedented what occurred in 2020 and since. And which brings us sort of circling back to Thailand. One, I find it highly disconcerting that Songkran has been so heavily, I don't know how you put it, meddled with, disturbed, just as an overall holiday here in Thailand. Going on, you know, now we're on our third Songkran dealing with this. Now, admittedly, things were better than last year and better than the year before with respect to, you know, being left kind of alone or left to our own devices to, you know, have a good time over this past holiday. But again, you know, here we are, and you're seeing people using illegal water cannons, not illegal water cannons, using water cannons to stop illegal water fight, you know, / protest. Again, I'm not getting into the protest angle of this. I'm simply looking at this as, okay, if this is policy regarding COVID, and if supposedly, and yet nobody's ever shown me any data as to the amplifying effects of water associated with this whole thing, I don't know. And again, it's stated as sort of almost self-evident. What I find fascinating is commonsensical notions that we once took as self-evident, or notions of just basic individual freedom that people understood as self-evident, are now sort of inverted and questioned as if, well, what's wrong with you for thinking that that's just a given? And then meanwhile, some of the most absurd things like I remember somebody telling me, well, pools obviously amplify the spread of this thing. How, why, where do you get that from? I mean, to me, a puddle of chlorine is probably going to kill whatever's in it. I mean, that's what I would think. Now, meanwhile, obviously, water fighting doesn't involve chlorinated water necessarily. We're not talking pool water. But nobody's provided any data with respect to why, nobody that I've seen, and I'm happy to, I'm happy to stand corrected. I'm asking, where is the data that water fighting has any impact on this? And moreover, another point to be brought up here is, look, here we are again, we're 2 years out of dealing with this. Initially, the issue was deaths. Okay, that made some sense, but now it all seems to be circulating around cases. Cases seem to be the only thing we're worried about. Well, last I checked, it's not really the government's job, any government's job, to sit around and tell me what I can and can't do because I might get a cold or I might get the flu. And I'm not saying COVID is either one of those things. What I'm saying is if it is, as the data seems to suggest now, these latest iterations are as mild as they appear to be, why is it any of the government's business, what people do with respect to their own free time on this issue? I think strong arguments can be made on multiple different fronts with respect to why is it their business, period. But okay, setting aside certain public health concerns, at the point at which it's no longer clearly an existential threat, or at the point at which, okay, in the beginning, I think it's safe to say we didn't know what it was, and it turned out not to necessarily be an existential threat, but we didn't know that at the time. So, okay, I understand the argument of taking certain precautions, but we're 2 years out now. And if nothing else sums up the absurdity of this, fighting water with water, if water is the problem, you're going to use water to stop it, it just doesn't make any sense to me.